Welcome to Reformed Thinking. So, imagine you are walking into the Louvre, right?
Okay.
You walk in and you are standing directly in front of this priceless 16th century Renaissance masterpiece.
Right. Taking it all in.
Yeah, you look at the incredible brushstrokes, the vibrant oils, the genius of the entire composition.
It is stunning.
But then you just glare at the canvas and call it absolute trash simply because you only care about the invisible thoughts that were inside the painter's mind.
I mean, that sounds totally absurd. You'd probably be thrown out of the gallery for saying something so ridiculous.
You really would.
Yeah.
But according to the material we are analyzing today, this is the precise way a massive portion of the modern world treats the physical universe.
Yeah, it is kind of shocking when you frame it like that.
It is. We are looking at a staggering theological concept presented in our text today, which is God's sovereign gladness and exultation in his physical, material craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And we are basing this entire conversation on a rigorous analysis of Psalm 104, specifically looking at the summit of that text, which is verse 31.
Yeah, that verse is the key to all of this.
So let me just ask you, the listener, directly. Do you think God actually likes the physical world? Or do you treat the material universe as this temporary, dirty container that your soul just needs to escape?
That is a heavy question to start with.
It is. But today's deep dive is going to completely shatter the idea that the physical world is just some unspiritual accident.
It really is the absolute definition of theological muddy waters for the modern mind. Because, we have been trained from birth to separate the spiritual from the physical.
Oh, 100%.
And the sources we are working through, they identify two massive errors of our age regarding how people view physical matter.
Okay, what was the first one?
On one side, you have secular naturalism. This is the perspective that claims the universe is just a blind, unguided accident. Under this secular framework, you might look at a towering cedar tree in a vast forest, or a moonlit mountain lake, and you systematically strip it of any transcendent meaning.
You just boil it down to the math.
Yeah, you reduce that breathtaking lake or that ancient tree to basic biochemical equations, random cellular mutations, and physical laws operating inside a cold, closed system.
It strips the world of its deliberate artistry.
It does. It totally flattens it.
I want to push back on that slightly, though. Not that it is wrong, but the secular side is pretty obvious. We expect a naturalistic worldview to strip the magic out of a mountain lake.
That is a fair point.
But treating the physical world as a dirty shell or a temporary prison is a trap that religious people fall into constantly.
All the time.
Going back to that Louvre analogy, we have believers standing in front of the masterpiece of the physical cosmos, rolling their eyes and talking about how they cannot wait to fly away to some invisible, ethereal realm. The sources actually call this practical Gnosticism.
Which is a huge issue.
It functions like a sickness within the church. It is this false idea that physical matter is inherently inferior, perhaps even inherently sinful, and that true spiritual life is purely ethereal, existing entirely in the realm of the mind and the soul.
Right.
So why do believers fall into this trap so easily when their own scriptures say God created the dirt?
That is a crucial diagnostic question, right? Believers frequently absorb the philosophical assumptions of their surrounding culture without even realizing the compromise taking place.
Right, just sort of seeps in.
Yeah, if you trace the intellectual genealogy of this, you end up looking at the ancient Greek philosophers, specifically Plato.
Plato. Always Plato.
Always him. The Platonic framework taught that the material world we see and touch was just a crude shadow of the real, ideal spiritual world. For them, the physical body was quite literally a tomb for the soul.
Wow, a tomb.
Yeah. And that philosophical assumption infected the early church. You see the early apologists fighting against Gnosticism tooth and nail.
Because it is so pervasive.
Exactly. And it continues today.
Yeah.
We have absorbed this idea that the less physical something is, the more holy it is.
Which is totally backward according to the sources.
It is. The texts point out a massive contradiction to this Gnostic mindset, which is simply that God invented matter.
Yeah.
The Creator did not just invent angels and invisible spirits. He designed physical lungs for the explicit purpose of drawing in physical oxygen.
That is so basic, but we miss it.
We do. He crafted microscopic taste buds for the specific purpose of eating physical food and experiencing the sensation of flavor. He constructed the physical universe as a massive material theater designed to display his glory.
I love how the texts use very concrete, tangible imagery to combat this ethereal mindset.
Yeah, they really ground it.
They describe rotting tree stumps, gray tree frogs hiding in hollow metal posts, the salty sweat that stings the eyes of a runner.
That is real life.
It is, and by deliberate sovereign design, it is entirely physical.
The sources pull a fantastic quote from C.S. Lewis to really hammer this home.
Oh, I love that part.
Yeah, Lewis basically says there is no use trying to be more spiritual than God.
Right.
God never meant man to be a purely spiritual creature. That is why he uses material things like water, bread, and wine to communicate grace.
Realizing that matter is a deliberate artistic construction leads directly to a massive historical question, though.
What is that?
Well, it is easy to say God loves the physical world when we are comfortably sitting in an air-conditioned studio protected from the elements.
Sure.
But how did this theological idea survive in ancient Israel? The physical world there, I mean, the droughts, famines, storms, was literally trying to kill them.
Yeah, nature was not a scenic backdrop. It was a threat.
Right. And they were surrounded by pagan cultures who viewed physical matter entirely differently.
We have to place ourselves directly into the geopolitical and agricultural reality of the ancient Near East to get this.
Let's do that.
The text argues that in the Old Testament, physical survival was tied directly to covenantal obedience. We are talking about an agrarian society functioning on the very edge of survival.
Right, no safety nets.
None. Rain, grain, wine, oil, and the harvest were not abstract concepts you bought at a grocery store. A drought was a terrifying existential threat.
It meant your children would starve.
Precisely. And the surrounding nations, the Canaanites, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, were totally soaked in polytheism and pantheism.
Right, like the Canaanites worshipped Baal-Hadad, and
Yeah.
who is specifically a storm god, which makes perfect sense if you are terrified of a drought.
That hits the mark perfectly.
Yeah.
They believed Baal-Hadad controlled the rain, the thunder, and the lightning.
Okay.
But notice the theology of Baal. In the Canaanite mind, Baal was not a transcendent creator standing outside the universe. He was a finite force, sort of immanent within nature.
He was part of the system.
Yeah, he had to fight other gods, like Mot, the god of death and drought. The Egyptians operated similarly. They deified the Nile River itself as a source of life. They worshipped the sun as the god Ra.
And the Babylonians had a totally chaotic view, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Their primary creation myth, the Enuma Elish, is just a story of absolute chaos.
Right.
They believed the cosmos was the chaotic byproduct of a literal war between finite deities.
A war in heaven.
Yeah. In their view, the physical world, the sky and the earth, was fashioned from the torn corpse of a defeated sea dragon named Tiamat.
That is so morbid.
It is. And the god Marduk slaughtered her to make the world.
I want to make sure the listener captures the distinction here. So in all these pagan myths, the gods are trapped inside the natural order.
Yes.
They are part of the system. They are subject to decay, subject to hunger, subject to losing battles against other gods, and frankly, they are subject to manipulation by humans.
That is the key.
It is kind of like the difference between a character inside a video game, bound by the game's code, versus the programmer sitting at a desk who coded the entire game out of nothing. The pagan gods are just powerful non-player characters trapped inside the game.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the ancient worldview. Because the pagan systems believed their gods were trapped inside the physical system, they believed you could manipulate those localized nature gods through cultic rituals.
So if I do X, the god has to do Y.
Yeah, you perform the right sacrifice, you manipulate Baal, and you guarantee your crops will grow. The gods needed the sacrifices to survive,
Yeah.
and the humans needed the rain to survive.
A codependent, terrifying system of mutual manipulation.
It was exhausting.
Well, if that is the cultural backdrop, it radically changes how we read the text we are analyzing today.
It really does.
Psalm 104 wasn't written as some peaceful, relaxing nature poem you read while sipping tea on a Sunday morning.
Not at all.
This was an aggressive theological weapon designed to strip the pagan gods of their supposed authority over the elements.
It was an absolute polemical strike against the entire surrounding culture. Through the scriptures, Yahweh introduced transcendent monotheism.
Right.
He creates out of nothing, what the theologians call creatio ex nihilo. The texts stress his absolute self-sufficiency, a theological concept known as aseity.
Aseity, let's define that.
Aseity means God is of himself, he lacks nothing. He does not need the universe to exist, and he certainly does not need the blood of bulls to sustain his energy.
He is not dependent on the system.
Exactly. Psalm 104 functions to prove to the ancient Israelite that every single drop of rain, every flash of lightning, and every mountain goat giving birth on a high crag belongs exclusively to the sovereign decree of Yahweh.
Wow.
It tells the terrified Israelite farmer that their crops do not depend on localized agricultural deities like Baal, but on the active, personal providence of the one true God, who stands entirely outside of creation as its sovereign programmer.
That is huge, because Psalm 104 functions as this theological weapon against false gods. Its very structure is designed to mirror the ultimate display of Yahweh's authority, which is the original creation week.
Yes.
This is where it gets highly fascinating regarding how the Book of Psalms is actually put together. Our sources unpack the brilliant literary placement of Psalm 104 within the canonical structure.
It is so intentional.
It really is. It is positioned right after Psalm 103, and the two form a massive theological pairing.
The literary term for this is a diptych.
A diptych.
Yeah, it is a work consisting of two painted or carved panels that are hinged together. The authors of the text highlight this deliberate canonical placement.
Okay, so how do they connect?
Well, Psalm 103 is this incredibly intimate, deeply personal hymn about covenant redemption. It praises God for removing sins as far as the east is from the west, for showing compassion, for healing diseases, for remembering that we are dust.
So it is very internal.
Yes, it is the inward gaze of the redeemed soul.
And it starts with the famous line, "Bless the Lord, O my soul."
Yeah, and then you turn the page to Psalm 104, and the psalmist begins with the exact same opening phrase.
Bless the Lord, O my soul.
Yes, but immediately the horizon dramatically shifts. It moves entirely from the internal redemption of the human soul to the external creation and governance of the massive physical cosmos.
It is quite literally two hinges on a massive door.
That is a great visual.
The God who shows tender mercy to your internal, invisible soul is the exact same God who governs the chaotic oceans, the massive weather systems, and the shifting tectonic plates.
Yes.
The theological takeaway for the listener here is staggering. Redemption is not an escape from physical reality. Redemption points toward the restoration of physical reality.
You do not leave the physical world behind when you are redeemed. You finally recognize who actually owns it and sustains it.
The God of intimate mercy is the God of the violent storm.
Structurally, the texts trace how Psalm 104 rigorously models the hexameron.
And for the listener, the hexameron is the theological term for the 6 days of Genesis 1 creation, right?
Right. Psalm 104 walks chronologically through the Genesis account, translating the historical prose of Genesis into vibrant, soaring Hebrew poetry.
Let's actually walk through that poetic structure, because building this cosmic inventory creates an incredible amount of theological tension that demands a resolution.
Okay, let's do it. The psalm starts by dressing God in light as a garment and stretching out the heavens like a tent. He lays the beams of his chambers on the waters.
So that correlates directly to days 1 and 2 of the creation week, the creation of light and the firmament.
Exactly. Then the poetry moves to establishing the earth on its foundations and setting the strict boundaries for the waters.
The dry land and the seas.
Yeah, the text describes the mountains rising and the valleys sinking to their decreed, sovereignly appointed places. That corresponds to day 3.
Then it brings in the celestial bodies, the moon and the sun for the seasons, which clearly points back to day 4.
Yes, the text beautifully describes how the moon marks the seasons and the sun knows its precise time for setting. It dictates the alternating rhythms of the physical world.
Day and night.
Right. It describes nocturnal predators, the young lions roaring for their prey and seeking their food from God in the darkness. And then the sun rises, the lions retreat, and human beings go out to their physical labor until evening.
It is such a vibrant picture of an ecosystem.
And finally, the psalm turns its gaze to the vast, terrifying sea, teeming with innumerable creatures. It specifically mentions Leviathan, the massive sea monster whom God formed just to play in the ocean. This correlates to days 5 and 6 of the creation week.
So this majestic catalog of the physical universe builds incredible tension for the reader.
It really does.
You have the creation of light, the boundaries of massive oceans, jagged mountains, predictable seasons, hunting lions, and massive sea monsters playing in the deep.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And all of this intense physical detail requires a massive theological climax to explain the obvious question. Why did God bother making all of this physical matter so intricate in the first place?
Right.
What is the point of a sea monster playing in an ocean where no human can even see it?
Well, this brings us to the absolute summit of the text, Psalm 104.31. This verse reveals the teleological purpose of the universe.
Teleological.
Yeah, teleological means the ultimate design, the end goal, or the final purpose of a thing.
Okay.
The English translation states, "May the glory of the Lord last forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works."
Let's slow down and really analyze this verse because our sources go extremely deep into the grammatical exegesis here.
They do, and it is fascinating.
They break down the precise Hebrew synthetic parallelism, and the listener really needs to understand how this grammar radically changes our perspective on God's emotions regarding the physical world.
The text provide a rigorous linguistic analysis. Hebrew synthetic parallelism is a poetic structure where the second line does not simply repeat the first line. It advances, intensifies, and completes the thought.
So it is a buildup.
Yeah. Let's look at the first clause.
Yehi kivodi lawe leolam. The verb here, yehi, is adjussive.
Wait, let's define that for the listener. What does adjussive actually mean for my daily life? It sounds like a dry grammar term. I know it does. Adjussive is a grammatical mood that expresses a command, a permission, or a strict wish. But in this specific biblical context, the text argues it is adjussive of absolute prophetic certitude.
Oh, wow.
It is not just a polite wish, like saying, "I hope it doesn't rain today." It is a mic drop of prophetic guarantee. It is a declaration of a reality that must and shall happen by divine decree.
Okay, so it is a sure thing.
Yes. The subject of this adjussive verb is kabod, which translates to glory.
Right.
But the root, physical meaning of kabod,
Yeah.
indicates heavy, weighty majesty. It is substantial. It possesses gravity.
So it's not just some shiny floating light.
It is heavy.
Yeah.
The theological argument is that the physical universe functions as a massive cosmic mirror, designed intentionally to reflect this heavy, weighty majesty back to the Creator and to the rational creatures observing it.
So the first line establishes that God's weighty majesty is guaranteed to be reflected forever.
Yes.
How does the second clause advance this idea?
The second clause is, "Yizmak Yahweh be'amasav." The verb used here, samak, denotes a vibrant, active, and highly expressive state of gladness.
Gladness.
Yeah. And the authors of the text point out something incredibly significant. The original author deliberately bypassed other Hebrew words that mean passive acceptance or simple favor.
So there were other words available.
Oh, plenty. He could have used words like ratza or chafetz, which might just mean God approves of the world.
Like giving it a passing grade.
Right. But by choosing samak, the text indicates an eruptive, exultant, active joy.
And the word for works in that clause, ma'asa, signifies completed craftsmanship.
It does.
The analysis notes that the author intentionally avoided Hebrew words that mean exhausting, grueling toil. Let me frame this for the listener.
Okay.
If God is experiencing vibrant, active gladness in his craftsmanship, does this mean he looks at his creation the way an artist looks at a finished masterpiece, rather than a tired factory worker looking at a grueling chore?
That is precisely the theological argument the sources are making. God's creation of the cosmos was an effortless, artistic exercise of his sovereign will.
He didn't break a sweat.
No. It resulted in a physical masterpiece in which he takes infinite, active delight. He is not wiping sweat from his brow, exhausted by the sheer effort of managing the planets.
Right.
He is actively exulting in the beauty and the function of his own physical design.
Understanding that God possesses this active, vibrant joy naturally leads to a massive theological question and, frankly, a point of confusion for a lot of people.
Which is?
Where does this emotion come from? If God is actively rejoicing in the physical creation, does that mean he was lonely or bored before he made it? Does God need the creation to be happy?
That is such a common misconception. And this is where the source texts introduce very strict theological categories, aligning with classical confessional standards regarding the nature of God.
Okay, let's unpack that.
They bring in the doctrine of divine impassibility.
Impassibility.
Yes. Impassibility means that God, in his divine essence, cannot be manipulated, harmed, or emotionally fluctuated by external forces outside of himself.
I have to challenge this because if God doesn't have emotional fluctuations, doesn't that make him sound like a cold, unfeeling robot?
I get why people think that.
Like a stoic block of ice in the sky. How does a perfectly static, impassible God experience the exultant joy we just talked about?
That is the paradox that trips people up. Impassibility does not mean God is an unfeeling block of ice. It means he is a localized explosion of constant, maximum, infinite joy that cannot be diminished or increased by outside factors.
Oh, so he is already at maximum joy.
Exactly. His emotional state is not codependent on temporal changes in the universe.
Hmm.
Because God is impassible, his joy in creation is entirely self-contained, proactive, and eternally full.
He does not need external validation from us or from the physical universe.
No. The texts emphasize the pretemporal reality of the Trinity. Before a single atom existed, before time began, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit shared infinite, perfect, mutual delight in each other's perfections.
I want to offer an image to make this mechanism concrete for the listener.
Go for it.
Think of a massive, ancient stone fountain in a courtyard. A fountain does not become fuller by overflowing. The water spilling over the edges into the basin below doesn't add to the volume of water already rushing from the infinite source.
That is a great way to look at it.
Right. The creation of the physical universe is simply the majestic splash of that pre-existing, perfect Trinitarian joy spilling over. Creation didn't add a single drop to God's happiness. Creation is the visible, physical overflow of it.
That fountain analogy captures the mechanics of the doctrine perfectly, and this concept entirely shatters the error of deism.
Deism.
Yeah, deism views God as distant, detached clockmaker who wound up the physical universe with a set of natural laws and then walked away, abandoning it to run on its own.
Right. The set it and forget it version of God.
Yes, and Psalm 104 depicts the exact opposite. It depicts an intensely active, personal, ongoing providence. God is actively restoring the physical world right this second.
Every moment.
He is providing the very breath to the beasts. The text highlights some staggering examples of this from the psalm.
Like the sea monster.
Yeah. Remember the Leviathan we mentioned earlier? God created that massive, terrifying sea monster simply to play in the vast, crushing depths of the oceans where no human eye can even survive to see it.
That specific part of the analysis stood out to me as a massive paradigm shift.
How so?
The idea that there are microscopic diatoms at the bottom of frozen lakes, single-celled algae with these incredibly intricate geometric silica shells that exist simply to display stunning structural beauty for the creator's own gladness.
It is wild to think about.
It is. As humans, we tend to judge the value of every physical thing by its utility to us. If we cannot eat it, harvest it, mine it, or take a photograph of it for social media, we assume it has no value.
We make it all about us.
But this theology argues that creation exists for God first.
It completely rebukes human-centered pragmatism. God brings rain on the trackless desert where no human dwells.
Why?
Because he likes it. He watches over the birth of mountain goats on jagged cliffs where no zoologist is taking notes. He enjoys the physical mechanics of his world.
It is just for him.
And because this massive joy is an overflow of the Trinity, we have to look specifically at the second person of the Trinity to see how this physical craftsmanship is fully realized and validated in human history.
This connects the joy of Yahweh directly to the person and work of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Our texts reference the opening of John's Gospel in Colossians chapter 1. The eternal Logos, the Word, is the active agent through whom the Father spoke the physical universe into existence.
The text stressed that Jesus Christ is not merely a passenger visiting the physical world. He is the architect.
The architect.
The physical universe was constructed specifically as the stage for the incarnation. The astonishing climax of physical reality is when the Word became flesh.
When you think about the incarnation through the lens of God genuinely valuing physical matter, it changes everything about how you read the Gospels.
It completely changes the frame.
The Creator took on a real, biological, physical human body. A body constructed from the very dust he himself shaped back in the Garden of Genesis.
The physiological reality of the incarnation is astounding when viewed through this theology.
It really is.
He breathed physical air into physical lungs. He drank physical water from physical wells. He sweated actual drops of sweat.
That's sweat.
He felt the physical heat of the Middle Eastern sun on his skin. He possessed fingernails and vocal cords.
He was completely tangible.
By entering his own creation as a physical man, the Lord forever validated the dignity and the theological weight of the material world. It is not a dirty container. It is the holy habitation of the incarnate God.
So here is the natural progression of that logic. If Christ taking on a physical body validates matter during his earthly ministry, what does his physical bodily resurrection mean for the actual dirt, the oak trees, and the oceans of our current planet?
The source material turns directly to the theology of Romans chapter 8 to answer this.
Okay, what does Romans 8 say?
The physical resurrection of Christ guarantees the ultimate material restoration of the entire cosmos.
Wow.
The texts firmly reject the idea that the consummation of redemptive history is a disembodied escape into an ethereal heaven where we float on clouds playing harps as ghosts.
Again, that goes back to the Greek philosophical idea of escaping the dirty physical body.
Yes, that is totally and utterly rejected by the biblical framework.
So what is the alternative?
The ultimate hope is the descent to the New Jerusalem to a physically renewed, resurrected earth. Resurrected saints will occupy physical bodies, possessing flesh and bone, just like Christ's resurrected body.
We will still be physical.
Yes, we will eat physical food from the tree of life. The material creation itself, which Romans 8 says is currently subjected to futility and groaning under the curse, will be liberated into physical glory.
Knowing that the physical world is destined for a glorious resurrection demands a radical shift in how we live our daily lives right now.
It really does. It is not just future speculation.
Right. It is not just about a future hope. It dictates our present reality. The source material unpacks 3 massive practical applications based on this theology of God's joy in craftsmanship.
The first major application the texts present is that the listener must actively reject secular evolutionary naturalism and instead cultivate holy wonder for God's deliberate artistry in nature.
What does that look like practically?
Well,
It means when you walk through the woods on a Tuesday afternoon or when you stare out over a lake, you must consciously reject the narrative of random, meaningless mutation.
yes, you have to train your eyes.
You have to train your eyes to see deliberate, joyful artistry. We need to regain the dreaming eyes of wonder that a child possesses, rather than letting the rising sun, the intricate veins on a maple leaf, or the wetness of rain become dull, ordinary, and meaningless.
The texts argue we should turn our basic aesthetic appreciation of nature into conscious theological adoration of the Creator. We look at the complexity of a bird's wing and we praise the mind that drafted the blueprint.
That is the first application. What is the second one?
The second practical application addresses a completely different error. The listener must reject modern subjective mysticism and maintain strict cessationist boundaries regarding how God speaks.
Let's break down those terms so the listener can track the logic. Subjective mysticism is when people seek to find new voices, new personal messages, or new divine revelations through physical nature.
Right.
It is the temptation to walk into the woods and try to hear a specific personalized prophecy in the rustling of the pine trees, or looking for a sign in the shape of the clouds.
Yes. The source texts maintain a strict, unyielding boundary between general revelation, which is the physical world of nature, and special revelation, which is the written word of God.
Okay, so nature versus scripture.
Right. While physical nature displays God's massive might, his divine nature, and leaves humanity without excuse, it possesses no voice to save a human soul.
It cannot preach.
Nature cannot announce the gospel of Jesus Christ. A mountain cannot forgive your sins. Saving grace, authoritative commands, and specific divine promises belong exclusively to the closed canon of Holy Scripture.
So the mechanism is this. We look at the stars to admire his strength and his artistry, but we run to the scriptures to receive his grace and hear his voice. We shouldn't look for hidden mystical messages in the weather patterns.
The texts warn that looking for mystical guidance in physical elements is a dangerous error that leads away from the certainty of the biblical text.
Now, the third massive application presented in the source text deals with the human body itself, and it involves defending the complementarian creation order based on Genesis 1.27.
Yes, this is a very heavy application.
This leads to a highly controversial application in today's cultural climate. The sources take direct aim at modern fluid gender ideologies and transhumanism.
They do.
They argue that from a theological perspective, altering the physical body isn't just a modern social or political issue, but a direct critique of the Creator's physical craftsmanship. Let's break down the mechanics of their argument here. I want to be clear that we are just unpacking the source's argument for the listener.
Of course.
How do these modern ideologies function as an assault on the concept of God's joy in his work according to the text?
According to the theological framework of the source material, God created humanity in his own image, distinctly male and distinctly female. And he pronounced this specific physical biological design very good.
Okay.
Therefore, the sources argue that attempting to erase or alter biological reality is viewed as a theological rebellion.
So it is seen as a rejection of the design.
Yes, it is a declaration that God's physical design is actually an error, a mistake that requires surgical or psychological correction by humans. The theological argument made here is that this is a direct assault on the sovereign, joyful craftsmanship of the Creator.
So the sources argued that believers must honor and celebrate the distinct biological gender realities established by God by design because it honors the artist.
Yes. By defending this complementarian creation order, the authors of the text argue that believers are honoring the physical craftsmanship in which Yahweh takes internal sovereign delight.
It comes back to the physical body.
It ties the physical, biological design of the human body directly back to the active gladness of God discussed in Psalm 104. Our bodies are part of the masterpiece he rejoices in.
I want to add a final guardrail from the text regarding how we interact with the physical world.
That is a good idea.
Because there is a massive danger of overcorrecting. As we learn to love the physical world, it is so easy to start worshiping the creation instead of the Creator, falling into the exact idolatry mentioned in Romans 1.
Which is what the pagans are doing.
Precisely. The sources point to a brilliant principle articulated by Augustine to keep us safe. Augustine argued that we must enjoy the beauty of creation for God's sake.
Right, the difference between use and enjoyment.
Yeah, the Latin concepts are uti and free using versus enjoying. Do not let your joy terminate in the mountain or the lake. Let your joy rise through the physical object to terminate in the incomparable beauty of the Creator who made it.
That is the crucial saving distinction. The physical world is a massive system of signs pointing beyond itself.
Pointing up.
Yes, it is a cosmic sounding board designed to echo the majesty of God. If we fall in love with the wedding ring of creation and ignore the bridegroom who forged it and gave it to us, we commit idolatry.
That makes perfect sense.
Our joy in the physical world must always erupt into holy worship of the triune God.
Well, this has been a staggering look into the theology of the physical world. We have covered the ancient, terrifying battlefields against localized nature deities. We have waded into the dense Hebrew grammar of Psalm 104.
We really covered a lot of ground today.
We did. We examined the impassibility of the Trinity overflowing like a massive stone fountain, and we anticipated the physical reality of the future bodily resurrection. Thank you for joining this theological deep dive.
It was a great discussion.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, building on the mechanics we just discussed. If God takes active, vibrant, exultant joy in the hidden things of his physical creation, like the geometric perfection of microscopic diatoms at the bottom of a frozen ocean, or the swirling gases of stars and galaxies no human telescope will ever discover, how might that completely reshape your understanding of your own hidden acts of obedience or worship that no human eye will ever see? When you pray in a closet or serve someone in secret, does God take that same active, vibrant delight in the unseen craftsmanship of your quiet faithfulness? Until next time, keep thinking.